When it comes to investing your money, one way to identify opportunities is to consider the big trends that are happening in the world around us. Coming up in this video, 4 of my favourite trends and how they might translate into investment themes between now and the end of this decade. Hi everyone, I'm Martin Bamford, a chartered financial planner and informed choice, and in this video I'm taking a look at 4 of my favourite investment trends or investment themes that are likely to materialise between now and 2030, between now and the end of this decade. Thinking back to the start of my career in the financial services sector about 20 years ago now, I can still remember my first experience of hearing about an investment theme, and I was speaking to one of the fund managers who worked for the insurance company I was part of, and I asked him how he went about making his investment decisions, how he allocated money in his portfolio to different businesses, different stocks. And he smiled, he paused for a second, he smiled, and he looked at me and said, "Garden centres." And I was momentarily confused, but then he explained the reason he was so bullish about garden centres was because garden centres were a place where older people love to shop. And one of the trends that he noticed, and one of the trends taking place in the world at the time, same now as it was 20 years ago in fact, was that people are getting older. We've got an ageing population. So his central thesis here was that as more people were older and as we had a higher retired population, then there'd be more retired people to go and spend time shopping in garden centres. And therefore garden centres were an investment opportunity as a portfolio manager, and he would pick and choose some stocks to invest in which were garden centre related. So that was my first ever brush with the idea of an investment theme. And not much has changed in the past 20 years. The themes have changed, the trends have changed, but this idea that you can spot a trend and then work out which investments are likely to benefit from that trend emerging, I think is a really powerful investing concept. So investment themes are really that simple. Take a look at the world around you, look at what's changing and what's happening, and then think about which investments could benefit from those changes, from those events. Now, the difficult bit about investing on a thematic basis and looking for these trends, looking for these themes to exploit, is that none of us have got a crystal ball. We can see things happening in the world around us right now, and we can see things that might well change in the future, and we can think about the impacts of those changes on different investment types, but we cannot say for sure that that will genuinely result in an improved investment situation for a particular sector or for a particular business. Now, as a result of that absence of a crystal ball, it's really, really important here not to go all in with a particular investment theme. So don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Diversification remains essential here. So if you identify a number of investment themes rather than just one of them, that's better because you can hedge your bets a bit, you can spread your investment ideas across multiple themes. And that way, if one of them doesn't materialize in the future, or if the businesses you've selected don't benefit from that trend in the same way you expected them to, you haven't lost your investment, or you haven't suffered financially as a result of that investment not coming good, because you've got multiple investments going on across multiple trends, multiple themes. So I really do want to stress the importance here of diversification when it comes to this. Now, one way to diversify when it comes to investment themes is to consider a core satellite approach to your portfolio. So don't worry about thematic investing for the core of your portfolio. Keep that simple, keep it broadly allocated to equities and bonds and property, maybe even some cash. So invest in a traditional sense with the core of your portfolio, the majority of it. And then the satellite bit, the bit around the edges, is where you can apply these investment themes that you come up with. Look at these trends and come up with themes that may well benefit you in the future. So a core satellite approach is a very good way of reducing the risk associated with picking an investment trend, an investment theme, which then doesn't materialize for any particular reason. With all of that said, one of the likely trends that drive investment themes in the future, I've picked 4 of my favorites, and there's many, many out there, but these are 4 that I particularly enjoy at the moment. And the first one is an even bigger role for technology. Now, in the past week or so, we have seen the S&P 500 index in the United States reach 30,000 points for the first time in history. And it's an interesting one to look at from a perspective of technology stocks, because driving that meteoric rise in the S&P 500 wasn't the 500 best companies in the United States. It was largely a small number, a handful of tech stocks. And some people refer to the S&P 500 as the S&P 5 because of the dominance of those 5 tech stocks, the FANGs as we call them, which is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, which is now Alphabet. But A is not as good for the end of that acronym as G, as FANG sounds better than FANG. I'm not sure how you'd pronounce that, but FANG is the way that has driven the investment markets in recent years because tech stocks have become such a dominant force, and the market capitalization of those top 5 stocks in the S&P 500 represents about 23% of the overall index. So they are having a huge influence on market returns within that particular index. And of course, soon to be joining those 5 tech stocks is Tesla. Tesla's been admitted to the S&P 500 from the 21st of December. I've made a video about that too, so that's worth watching if you want to understand why Tesla's taking part in the S&P 500 after all this time. But is there still a continued role for tech stocks, for tech businesses? How will tech incorporate itself into our lives in an even bigger way in the future? And I think you just have to look back over the past few years about how much disruption is taking place in the world, in our day-to-day lives. We now have a taxi company which doesn't own any taxis in the form of Uber. We have a hotel company which doesn't own any hotels in the form of Airbnb. Tech is disrupting traditional business models. The way things used to be done is not the way it's done anymore, certainly won't be the way it's done in the future. And we're also seeing exponential growth in the development of artificial intelligence. Some of the applications of AI, including natural language processing, are both terrifying but also very, very exciting, and I believe will completely shake up many businesses in the future. It's no good to say that a business that has traditionally worked in a certain way will be able to continue competing and to remain competitive on that basis in the future, because tech is now such a disruptive force. And of course, the pandemic this year has brought us much closer to many different tech stocks, tech companies. We've seen the massive rise in video conferencing. It's now the way meetings take place. We don't see people face to face anymore. We do it via a computer screen. So companies like Zoom have benefited extremely well from that. And with gyms across the world closed during the pandemic, we've seen at-home, on-demand fitness providers like Peloton do incredibly well as well. And I should note here, of course, these are not recommendations to buy or invest in any particular stock. These are just examples of some businesses which have benefited from that pandemic. Whether or not their prominence in our daily lives will remain such a big force once the pandemic comes to an end, I think is to be seen. But I don't see us going backwards here. I don't see us ever returning to the old way of doing things, at least not in such big numbers as before. So where tech has become a useful part of our day-to-day lives, where it's made us more efficient, where it's reduced time for commuting, where it has reduced our cost in some cases, I don't think we're going backwards. I think we're only going forwards. The big trouble with this investing theme for tech stocks is that it's very difficult to spot the next opportunity. The big tech developments, the big disruption that comes from tech doesn't necessarily come from the big established players. So while you could back those FANG stocks and you could say, well, they're likely to be the ones that take things to the next level, it could well be businesses coming out from left field that are the next big thing. One good example of that was during the vaccine development process, where Pfizer worked with a German bioengineering company called BioNTech, and nobody had really heard of BioNTech before the Pfizer deal and before this breakthrough development of messenger RNA vaccine technology. There was an interesting point I heard the other day, which was typically a pharmaceutical company can develop, say, 5 or 6 big medicines, big drugs, big vaccines in a decade. Now they're talking about, with messenger RNA technology, being able to develop hundreds, if not thousands. So this is a game changer, but it's come from left field. It's come from a smaller business that you may not necessarily have been exposed to if you were in the S&P 500 stocks, for example. So looking for these opportunities can be very difficult indeed, unless you assume that the big established tech players are the ones that are going to have the next set of breakthroughs. And however you do it, please do keep in mind that we have seen tech bubbles before, and that right now the tech sector does look quite bubbly. It looks quite high priced, quite overvalued. So again, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Do remember the principles of diversification. And also remember, time is your ally when it comes to investing money. Don't invest for the short term. Don't invest on a speculative basis, but think about this in terms of decades instead of weeks or months or even years. The second big trend, which I think could lead to some quite interesting investment themes, is the world's aging population. And again, going back 20 years to when that fund manager just said the words garden centres to me, nothing has changed really. The world continues to age. So aging population is a big and continuing trend which could well drive investments in the future. According to the United Nations, there will be 1.4 billion over 60s worldwide by the year 2030. That's up from 900 million back in 2015. So it's a huge rise in an aging population. Far more older people out there, far more retired people out there. And in many cases, retired people who are holding on to an awful lot of wealth, an awful lot of buying power. So the silver dollar is becoming a really big factor in the success of many investments. With people getting older, one investment theme you might consider is healthcare. And I've already talked a little about vaccine technology and vaccine development. Governments around the world want to keep our elderly and vulnerable populations, they want to keep them healthy, they want to keep them secure because they have purchasing power and they are voters. And at the end of the day, if you can develop vaccines and fund the development of vaccines that will keep your elderly and vulnerable populations secure, you're far more likely to stay in government for longer. So there is a motivation there. So vaccine development, healthcare is one particular investment theme you might consider from an aging population. But other areas set to benefit from older people include wealth management. So businesses like mine, Informed Choice, which offers financial planning and wealth management, should do well as we see more of these post-war baby boomers reach retirement age. They've accumulated in the main a huge amount of wealth, and retirement is the time that they need to take advice and make decisions about how to invest that money and about how to pass it down to the next generation. So huge demand and a growing demand for wealth management services. And once the pandemic's out of the way, once we get back to a bit of normality, I imagine leisure and travel will do particularly well from that rise in the aging population too. We're going to unlock millions, if not billions, of older people who have money, who want to travel, who want to see the world, who want to make the most of their golden years in retirement. So travel, leisure could do very well indeed from that trend of an aging population. Another big trend right now is sustainability. And if you think back to before the pandemic started, the headlines were all about carbon emissions and about our impacts on the planet. Greta Thunberg was never out of the papers. We were seeing huge political movements like Extinction Rebellion dominating newspaper headlines too. There was a real and shift in focus towards our carbon footprints, about our impacts on the planet, particularly as the population, the global population, continues to rise. And translating that through to an investment theme, we have seen a massive rise in ESG investments. That stands for environmental, social and corporate governance theme investments, because people are now thinking about how they invest their money and the impact of those investments on our planet, on our children's planet. So ESG investing is becoming incredibly popular. There's still lots of question marks about what is a genuine ESG investment and where something called greenwashing is taking place to make something look green, to make it look environmentally sustainable. But I suspect in the future this trend of sustainability is going to become big. Just in the past few weeks, we've heard the UK government announce its green industrial revolution. As we come out of this pandemic, I believe the focus is going to be very much on sustainability, on environmental friendly factors. We've seen the UK government announce the ban of the sale of new petrol and diesel engine cars by the year 2030. So electric vehicle production, battery technology, all sorts of investment themes emerging from this trend of sustainability. Trend number 4, which translates into some exciting investment themes, is the next space race. Now, I was born at the end of the 1970s, so over a decade too late to witness the first space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. But something very exciting is happening now. We are seeing the emergence of a new space race, and this is taking place between the United States, Russia, but also Japan and India and China and other nations too. They are launching some incredibly exciting missions with ambitions to get back to the moon, to get to Mars, even to fly to and explore asteroids. And the amount of money that is due to be spent on this space race is eye-watering. Huge, huge sums of money. In fact, the Bank of America is forecasting that the global space industry could be worth over $1 trillion by the year 2030, and aerospace and defence companies both look set to profit from all of that expenditure on developing space technology. We're even going to see space tourism for the first time, and that's probably where the aerospace companies could benefit. They're certainly not benefiting from global travel at the moment, but maybe interstellar travel is a more viable option for them post-pandemic. So some really exciting things happening. And you only have to look at the growth of SpaceX, for example, to see how quickly private companies can develop technology in this space and outcompete government outfits like NASA. So now SpaceX has got its Crew Dragon rocket. They are taking astronauts to the International Space Station, something that they had to previously rely on other countries to do. So a huge, huge boon for this new space industry. The next space race is happening right now. It's a very, very exciting time, and that trend could translate through to some investment opportunities. What are some of the big trends that you believe will drive investment themes over the next decade or so? Let me know in the comments down below. I hope you found this video interesting. Please do leave a comment. I do love to hear from you. And also make sure you press that like button and that subscribe button. Ring the notification bell too so you get to hear about new videos as they go live. Until next time, I'm Martin Bamford, and when it comes to your money, the more you know, the faster it can grow.